And so I ended up working all week and couldn't go.
Wow. Hey, Bill, I'm gonna text you because I want that recipe. I love beans and I love peas and I do pea soup, and so all of what you're talking about, yum.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You bet.
All right, well, let's get started at 7:30. I actually have a bell somewhere.
All right. Good job, Dan.
So welcome to the January 5th, 2022 meeting of the Rotary Club of Sebastopol Sunrise. And Happy New Year to everybody. President David is on the way back from his holiday travels. He said he might join us from the road, but maybe not. So we'll proceed in his absence. And so now's the time to go ahead and mute all, and we will carry forth here.
No biting. No biting.
So Dan, you have to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Good.
Yes.
All right. So we're part of how we're taking care of each other is meeting on Zoom again while this Omicron variety is really peaking. Some folks were talking about it earlier, and one of the local hospitals is out of ICU beds. So we need to do everything we can to flatten the curve. And I put this up just to show that we've got the fastest spike we've had in Sonoma County in the history of the pandemic right now. Yes, some of the symptoms are lesser for some folks, but that doesn't mean it won't tragically affect others. And we just need to do our best to not spread it around. So thanks to all of you for your flexibility, and look forward to, as soon as it's safe, meeting back in person and having a nice breakfast in person as well. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if I saw Henry Alker on our call. Do I have a volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Bill Sauber, go ahead and unmute yourself and lead us.
Everybody stand and face the flag. Hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I guess we should have muted afterwards. So let's see. Joe, will you unmute?
Yes, Dan.
Song, and those of you who want to be heard, go ahead and unmute too.
A little bit of, since this is the first meeting of 22, and I heard a few Happy New Years, I think we all know, or most of the words to the one verse of Auld Lang Syne. So why don't we do that, Dan? What do you think?
Sounds good, Joe.
Okay, here we go. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, to taste the good old for old lang syne.
Well, it was very evident that we did not know one verse, but it's a very nice song, Joe.
I used to know it, but a lot younger then.
All right. Well, let's see. Thank you very much for Joyce for being on very early and greeting folks. Much appreciated. And also production support from Michael Cook, getting used to back doing Zoom. He did the heavy lifting and helped coach me through a few things yesterday, and hopefully it'll all turn out all right. And Jim Goodenough, I saw you there. Do you want to unmute and give us a thought for the day? Hello, Jim.
I'm trying to think of one. My thought for the day is that Linda and I are both really sick.
Oh, no.
So take the isolation and masking seriously, and we'll let you know when we know what our tests say.
Okay, and let us know if you need any chicken soup delivered or anything.
Thank you.
Wish you, yeah, that might be a good sobering thought for the day. Everybody be careful. Okay, so I'm not sure if we have any guests. I didn't see any guests on here, but thanks to all of you for being Zoom participants, and we'll get back to in person where we can have some guests. But I didn't see any on the list, nor do I see any on the display screens here. Okay, well, I jumped the gun. Now it's time to move on. We've already done that. So. Hey, we do have some birthdays though. Wayne Britton, was Wayne on today? I don't think I saw Wayne either.
Celebrating.
He must be celebrating. Okay, and Kathy
Bummer, we can't
Rogers.
sing.
I know, and Kathy Rogers on the 11th, and I don't think she's here either. Although we do have pretty good turnout for switching. I think we've got about 28 people here, so I appreciate all of those. So if you see Wayne or Kathy, wish them a happy birthday. And if David had joined us, we were going to recognize him a little bit because he sent some photos along, and he ran into Rotarian from the Noon Club, Mike Long, hiking in the desert just by chance. And he sent these photos to the Ellen, the president of the Noon Club, and she wrote back, she said, all I see are a couple of old goats. So he might get teased about that a little bit too. We'll welcome him back, and he'll get recognized for that next week.
Kind of like Lori and I running into each other on a beach in Hawaii. Crazy.
It's a small world.
That was
Okay.
twice.
Mark your calendars. We had a good food bank volunteer session in December. And then, of course, our big food giveaway, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we've got another couple of shifts coming up, Wednesday, the 26th of January, and Thursday, the 24th. And we're combining our efforts with the Noon Club so we get a bigger group there. And we're testing the 2 days to say which one gets a bigger group. So that's why there's a Wednesday and a Thursday over the next couple of months. And holiday food box, that was a lot of fun. And to give away big bags of toys and see the smiles on those kids' faces, just an amazing day. So we fed 1,200 people. So much gratitude to so many people, but Bill Sauber and John Boletto, with all the heavy equipment and moving things around, couldn't have done it with them. Michael McLaughlin, Michael Fells, Kathy Rogers, Judy Rice arranged cards for everybody, hand-done cards, holiday cards to go with each box. Ken Silvera from Fiesta Marcus was very generous to us. Corbell donated the boxes. Michael, anything else you want to say, Michael McLaughlin?
Just a big thank you to everybody that participated. They were not the best of conditions with the rain, but we got the pop-up sent up, and it all worked out, and much better than I actually anticipated it was going to. So thanks for everyone that jumped in and lended a hand. It was a powerful thing.
Wayne's here. We get to sing.
Ah, welcome, Wayne. I think he's still joining. Let's see.
Where is he?
Oh, he's got his mute on there. Where did he go? Ah, there he is. Okay. Happy birthday, Wayne.
Well, thank you.
I think we've got a minute for a song. Let's sing. So those who want, unmute, sing, and then go ahead and mute again. So, Joe.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
dear
dear
Wayne.
Wayne.
Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday
to
to
you.
you.
And many more.
All right. How are you going to celebrate your birthday, Wayne?
You're muted.
Oh,
You're muted. You're muted.
Oh,
oh, mute.
Operator
Still
error.
muted.
how you seem to be unmuting.
Okay, now we hear you.
You're muted.
Okay, I got my space bar down. I think I'll sleep in, so there you
Too
go.
late for that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, great. And so, yes, and thank you very much for everybody who helped out in any way for our holiday food giveaway there. In fact, I think we got Ken from the Noon Club, and I think that's Diana Curtis on the other side loading up food for people. All right, Monday hikes. We're going to go to Bishop's Ranch up near Healdsburg this Monday. Dewey Watson is on the board up there, and he's going to lead us on some of the trails of their 63 acres. We're meeting an hour later to accommodate the venue and Dewey's schedule. So usually we leave at 7:30 sharp, but next Monday we'll leave at 8:30 sharp. And it's been some beautiful mornings here, a few shots from the last couple of Monday mornings hikes. So join us if you can. And the Rotary Club of Sebastopol, they are doing grant applications, and for about the next 10 days, they're still taking applications and wanted us to let any organizations we know that they're entertaining grant applications, usually in the amounts of $500 to $5,000. Last year, it looked like they did about $15,000 in grants. So if you know of organizations that might fit their criteria, go check out their website page and make sure those organizations know to get an application in within the next 10 days. So. Would anybody like to share any moments of thanks with either contributions or acts of kindness that they'll do? I'm sure a few folks had some fun things happen for New Year's or holiday celebrations since we last met. Shy group this morning. Maybe we have to go back to meeting in person for them. So, well, we're going to have an opportunity coming soon for us or people we know in the community, our friends who want us help us do good works, to have other ways to give to help our foundation. Some folks have to take required distributions from their retirement accounts if they don't need those to support themselves and their lifestyles. Those we can actually take into our foundation now, and we're looking at creating a way that if people have appreciated securities, we can do that. And since it's been difficult to have fundraisers lately, when we have needs, and I know I've been a bit successful in explaining some of the good works and projects we've been doing, and people have been being very generous. So that's helped out a lot with our food efforts and our help with the homeless efforts on our year-to-date funding. So stay tuned for hearing more about that. We have a number of dates coming up. Right after this meeting, stay on and join Michael Cook for the International Committee meeting. And since we didn't have one in December, that one's been deferred to today. And there will be another one on the January 26th for the International Committee meeting. So there's a couple of those this week. I mentioned the ranch hike on Monday. Hope to see many of you there. We'll meet, as I said, Hot Mug parking lot, and we'll leave in carpools at 8:30. Next, January 11th, the Tuesday, is the membership committee meeting that Kathy Rogers will lead online. The links are on the website on our calendar. Same with the board meeting for our club on the 17th. And on the 19th, Dale Knight will speak to us about the Uganda Projects program. That shall be the program that day. That's always very interesting to hear. So we've been involved in that for a couple of decades now. And I've mentioned the next International Committee meeting and the Empire Food Bank. And mark your calendars, tentative, but I think it's going to shape up. We're going to do a little post office at the Sebastopol post office, clean up the landscape there in cooperation with the Interact Club and the Rotary Club of Sebastopol. The Rotary Club of Sebastopol did an installation of their landscaping, I think in 2008, and it's needs a little TLC. And I think we can go ahead and have a little work day, and that'll be a great Interact project as well, similar to the efforts we've done with the road cleanup. So hope to see you there. Please mark your calendars.
For everyone that comes, be sure and wear your Rotarians at Work t-shirts.
Yeah.
If it's cold, just put them over the outside of a long sleeved sweater or something.
Good idea. Thanks for the reminder, Bill. Other announcements that people have from the community?
Can I ask where we get those t-shirts, Rotary at Work t-shirts?
Jerry.
From Jerry.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
had a opportunity for everybody to place an order, and we did a group order for the club, and they have a minimum order, so you can't just order one of those actually, but maybe there's a possibility to open that up again, which I'll talk to David and see if that's something we want to do.
Jerry, do you remember what the minimum is?
12.
I bet we could get to that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll work on it with David.
Good. Okay,
And I have an announcement.
go ahead.
Just wanted to let everybody know that the Noon Club is going forward with their crab feed this year. It's not going to be in person. It's going to be a drive-through. It's scheduled for Saturday, February 12th. And they have various times that you'll be able to drop by the Holy Ghost Hall to pick up the box with all the crab in it. It's $150 for two. So you might want to consider that as a way of helping to fund the Noon Club.
Yeah, my guess is it'll be a pretty tasty box full of food. They do a very good job with that.
Yeah, you're getting 3 crabs.
Nice.
Really? And how much is it?
It's $150 for the box, which is designed to feed 2 or 3 people.
Nice.
Any other announcements? Okay, well, let's see. Well, we're going to give our speaker, Michael Fells, extra time. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and turn the floor over to Charlie Judson to provide an introduction. And we're very lucky to have our own Michael Fells as our speaker today.
Yes, indeed. We have one of our own here, and he's an author. He'll be doing a reading of his work in Occidental next month. We asked him to do a preview for us, and he agreed to do that. I was thinking, in the interest of keeping things short, that really all I needed to say was that Michael needs no introduction because we all know him. But then I kind of thought better about it. And I thought of that Dos Equis beer commercial with the most interesting, pardon me, the most interesting man in the world. Well, imagine Michael as that guy. He really could be that guy. He's got the right voice for it. He's about the same age. He's very authentic. So imagine he's sitting at the table and he looks into the camera and he says, I don't often talk about myself, but when I do, modesty is virtue. So I'm going to talk about him a little bit, but I'll still keep it short. He is the author of 6 books and several plays. He holds a PhD. His Doctor of Philosophy degree he got from the University of Texas at Austin in 1989. He's been a school administrator from Cal State LA with its 20,000 students to the Fort Ross Elementary School District on the coast with an enrollment of less than 20 students. While he was there, he was the superintendent, the principal, and an upper grades teacher all at the same time. And he also did a stint in there somewhere in the middle in East LA, which is quite the place. He's a world traveler and he's visited 30 countries and counting. He has 4 adult children and 14 grandkids, and he's been a Rotarian for 24 years. And also, and this is noteworthy, he's handled all the secretary duties of this club for longer than I've been a Rotarian. And that means going to all the board meetings, taking the minutes, taking the notes, taking the role at the meetings, handling all those duties. So thank you very much, Michael, for that. And I'll also mention that this little biography is highly abbreviated, but that's the way it is because of time limits. So Michael, take it away.
Charlie, thank you very much. Well, good. We have a little bit extra time, so hopefully there'll be time for questions. I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit more of an introduction, but specifically with regard to my writing and sort of how I got into it. I was in my mid-50s when it really hit me that retirement wasn't just for other people, that eventually and not that far in the future it was going to happen to me. And I loved what I was doing at the university. I'd been doing it for a long time, but I thought, well, I better start thinking in terms of what I'm going to do to occupy some of my time and energy once I do retire. And I planned on retiring at 63, so that was my goal. I'd always enjoyed writing and I was fairly good at it, so I thought maybe that in some general way could be a focus for me. And I started working on short fiction, short stories. I had a lot of them in my head and I'd written some, but I hadn't really made the decision to go full speed ahead. But once I did, I started to write as much and as often as I could. I submitted stories to contests and to literary agents and journals, and I did have a couple of things published early on, but nothing spectacular. And then in 2003, I was invited to have several of my stories performed in a reader's theater venue with the Beverly Hills Public Library. This was a program that was sponsored by the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. And it was a program to highlight new LA writers. And I was thrilled to have my work included in that. And I loved the process of what was happening. They would rehearse the stories. I would be there as sort of as the writer and could comment on it. I loved hearing the words that I'd written performed by real actors. And so I decided that I should learn how to write plays. And I started in at UCLA and studied playwriting for 2 years with a wonderful playwright and director of the Fountain Theater in Los Angeles, Simon Levy. And I had a couple of things produced in small venues and continued to submit my work everywhere I could. That was essentially another full-time job. I was commissioned by the Fort Ross Conservancy at one point to write a series of vignettes depicting the life at the fort in the 1800s. And then as a result of that involvement, I was asked by a couple who believed that they were sort of the reincarnated spirits of the famous romantic Fort Ross lovers, Reznov and Arguello. that's a whole other story that's fun to know about if you don't. We did agree that I would do the screenplay for them, and they agreed that they would shop it in Hollywood. I did my part and wrote it, and they essentially didn't realize that it was going to be as much work as it was. So that never went very far. So at this point, it became pretty clear that if I wanted to have my projects see the light of day, I should probably learn how to self-publish. And that's what I began to do. The technology made it possible. And sometime I would be delighted to talk with you about that process and what's involved in it, and the benefits and the disadvantages of it. Would I be happy if my work was picked up by a big agent or a Hollywood studio? Of course I would. The odds of that are about as likely as me being drafted by the NBA. So I'm not holding my breath for that at all. I enjoy the process of writing, and I love to share my work. So I'd like to give you, as Charlie mentioned, I've published 6 books. I would like to read short selections of the 4 more recent ones. The first 2 are collections of short stories, and I think I'll skip those. The first one that I'm going to read from is what we call a long form memoir. This is the cover, and the lighting in here is not good, so I'm going to read by flashlight. We can pretend that we're sitting around a campfire, I guess. So this story, this part of the story, occurred in, and it's as true as I can make it. Started in 1969 up here in Sonoma County on the coast. Okay, so this was a night in October. It was about 10 o'clock. We were living in a very rural part of western Sonoma County up in the hills. There was no moon, and Hauser Bridge Road was quiet and dark. Louisa and I were home with our 1-month-old baby, Michaela. There was a knock on the door, and this alone was enough to alarm me, since this was neither the kind of road nor the kind of community where people walked around at night. Nor did they drop in unannounced, and we hadn't heard a motor or the sound of a car door slamming. I looked out the front window. We had no porch light. In the dark, I could make out the forms of 2 young men. I opened the door. They told me that they'd been driving up Coast Highway 1 with their girlfriends and had gotten into a quarrel, and the girls, one of whom owned the car they were driving, had kicked them out. Now they were lost, trying to get to Cazadero. Would we be willing to give them a lift? They'd pay our gas. I didn't like it, and I wasn't sure what to do, but I told Louisa to bundle up Kayla, and the 3 of us would take them in the Saab. The 2 guys got into the back seat, and we headed off on the 17-mile drive that took us past the Fort Ross School on Seaview and down the narrow, twisting Fort Ross Road that led to the resort village of Cazadero. During our trip, the men were pleasant, asking questions about our baby, complaining about how crazy their girlfriends had acted. We dropped them in front of the Cazadero post office. They gave me $10 and walked off into the dark. I was relieved that nothing had happened. I made a U-turn, and before we'd passed the Catholic church, we were confronted by flashing lights and a honking horn. I pulled over. It was my brother, Peter, who lived down the road from us. "You okay?" "Yeah, what's going on?" "Those guys in your car, they robbed Stewart's Point store at gunpoint." And there was more. They had pistol whipped the store's clerk, Ray Burley-Young. Apparently, the 2 men, Barry Mills, 21, and William Hackworth, 20, had bought and paid for 2 cans of soda before they pulled out 22 revolvers and told Ray to lay face down on the floor. They then proceeded to take $775 from the cash register, Ray's wallet and checkbook, and to hit Ray on the back of the head with one of the guns. We had helped them escape and had received $10 in stolen money to boot. Eventually, Mills and Hackworth were caught. Hackworth pleaded guilty and testified against Mills at his trial. Louis and I were subpoenaed to testify for the prosecution, but because how dark it had been that night, neither of us could make a positive identification. It turned out that Mills would be convicted of first-degree armed robbery and sentenced to 5 years to life in San Quentin, where he joined the then recently formed Aryan Brotherhood. He was paroled in December of 1977, but was soon rearrested for bank robbery and sentenced to federal prison for 20 years. Ultimately, he became a leader in the Aryan Brotherhood and was given a life sentence for the 1979 murder of an Aryan Brotherhood associate. The day after our adventure, the Santa Rosa Press Democrat ran a story about the Fort Ross School principal who provided the means of escape to 2 armed robbers. And to this day, I count my blessings that we survived that. The second short reading is from this book, which is called The Queen of Kansas. And this form of writing is, the first was really a memoir, a long memoir. The second one is really called historical nonfiction or literary nonfiction. And when you write about someone and you're trying to make it an interesting story, you have to, if they're not there to talk to, which in this case, my mother was the basis for this book. If they're not there to talk to, then you have to try to figure out the motivations for what people did. It's not enough to tell a story by listing first this happened, then that happened, then that happened. You have to get inside the head of the person you're writing about. And that's really the big challenge in terms of doing this kind of writing. So this is written from the perspective of my mother, or what I thought of her at a time before I was born. This was at the beginning of World War, well, actually I was born now, think about it. The beginning of World War II, and my parents were living in the Bay Area. My mother decided that she needed to go to work, and my father was about to join the military. So she looked first for a job at Kaiser Steel Yards in Hunters Point, was unsuccessful, and decided she would try to get a job at the steel yard, at the Kaiser shipyards in Richmond. Her only experience up to that point had been selling hats. So let me read a bit of this to you. The voices, the me is the voice of my mother, and the other person, Monty, is my father. So you get an idea. They decided, because she had a failure at applying for the job in San Francisco, that what she should do they would role play an interview with as if she were applying to Kaiser in Richmond. Monty. Well, good day, Mrs. Carbuncle. It is Mrs. Carbuncle, I presume. My name is Montgomery Ashcroft. You can call me Mr. Ashcroft. I'll be interviewing you for a position at Kaiser Shipyard number 3 in Richmond. Me. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ashcroft. As you know, I've come to inquire about a position with your company. I see. And what sort of position might you be interested in, Mrs. Carbuncle? We have a number of openings in very different areas. Well, Mr. Ashcroft, it might interest you to know that I have extensive sales experience in retail, both in New York and Los Angeles, women's wear primarily. So I was thinking of something along that line. Monty, looking down his nose. Well, I see, Mrs. Carbuncle. I'm certain your retail experience is exceptional. However, as you might be aware, we at Kaiser Shipyards manufacture battleships for the US Navy. Hardly the sort of thing that one tries on in a fitting room. Me, rapidly losing confidence. So, not much experience for sales ladies? I'm afraid that's correct, Mrs. Carbuncle. However, we do have openings for welders. I'd wager you'd be a knockout in a hard hat and goggles. And so much for that. By the time we stopped laughing, I was feeling better. and looking forward to nothing so much as climbing into bed. So she was pretty clueless, but she got smarter as she got older. Okay, third one. This one is called The Circle of Elephants. And it's a sequel to the second one I read from, and I will read you a part that is based on my aunt, who was, I always thought, a terrific person. This may or may not have ever happened, but I'll read it to you and we'll see. This is back in the early 50s, late 40s, actually. Stell was home, her name was Stell, enjoying a quiet Sunday, playing Duke Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige on her Victrola when the phone rang. It was Frida calling to catch up. When Frida phoned to catch up, it meant Stell would spend at least 40 minutes listening to Frida recount all the wonderful things she was doing, or details about the cutest soldier she'd met at the Hollywood Canteen on Cahuenga Boulevard, where, even though she'd never been more than an extra in the movies, she'd wrangled herself into a slot as a volunteer hostess for the servicemen shipping overseas. So this is during World War II. But this time she interrupted her own monologue with a question. So did you hear about what happened to that guy you carried a torch for back in high school, Rudy Martinez? Stell hadn't heard a thing about Rudy since Frida told her he joined the army. That was years ago, a lifetime. Truth be told, whatever torch she might have carried for Rudy had long since burned out. But of course she was curious. He was beaten nearly to death by sailors in that darn zoot suit thingamajiggy the other day in East LA. Graciela told me, poor guy, he probably won't live. Of course, Stell had followed that darn zoot suit thingamajig. It had started when a group of 20 young Mexican-American men were arrested for the murder of Jose Gallardo Diaz at a place near the Los Angeles River known as the Sleepy Lagoon. Now that the Americans of Japanese heritage had been rounded up and relocated to camps far from West Coast cities, a frightened public turned their attention and anger to the Mexican Americans. All 26 of the alleged perpetrators were jailed, and 16 of them were indicted for murder. The trial was a mockery of justice. The defendants were required to appear in court wearing zoot suits, visible proof of their criminality and depravity. A representative of the, quote, Foreign Relations Bureau of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, E. Duran Ayers, testified as an expert witness that Mexicans as a community had a bloodthirst and a biological predisposition for crime and killing, which he based on what he said he knew about the culture of human sacrifice practiced by the Aztecs. The general white population, as well as the general white law enforcement community, were convinced that any young brown man wearing a zoot suit had to be using or dealing drugs, was generally lawless, was definitely immoral, and was undoubtedly a danger to law-abiding white citizens. So on June 4th, 1943, approximately 200 white US Navy sailors took it upon themselves to rid Los Angeles of the zoot suit wearing scum. And so, arriving in a convoy of at least 20 taxis, these servicemen converged on East LA, the heart of the Mexican-American community, and proceeded to beat the crap out of any Pachuco with the unmitigated chutzpah to be on the street, decked out in the infamous long jacket, the ballooning pleated and peg pants, the pork pie hat, the dangling watch chain, and the thick-soled shoes, the zoot suit. So the last one I want to read to you is from the book that I will be focusing on completely in February at the Occidental Center for the Arts. And that book is different from any of these. It's called Bodies in Motion. This is the cover of that book. And it's a collection of short memoirs, and these are quite short, some longer than others, but they all deal in one way or another with the impact of travel or movement on especially my life, but I think most people are affected in one way or another by travel and movement, and that's the focus of this book, and thus the title. So I'd like to read you a selection from that. Hang on one second, I seem to have lost my place there. Oh no, here it is. This story is based on a Rotary project, actually, that I was involved with when I was in East Los Angeles. And at that time, we still had the group study exchange program, which was a wonderful program that sent professionals from different professional areas. In my case, it was education, led by a Rotarian leader, to another country to exchange experiences with people in the host country. So I was lucky enough to be chosen as a team leader in 2000, and was sent with a small group, three women to Lebanon in 2000. And it was an exceptionally moving experience for me. I learned a tremendous amount. I'd never been to the Middle East before. And Lebanon was in a relatively peaceful time at that point, but it wasn't that long since the end of the Lebanese Civil War. And if you know anything about the group study exchange, you would stay in the homes of your host families, and so I had 4 different host families over the course of the month that we were living there, and each of these families had stories to tell about their experiences growing and living and raising families in Lebanon, and this is a section from the story of one couple, and I will tell you as soon as I find it. I seem to have lost it. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is just north. This took place just north of the capital of Beirut. And this family was a husband and wife, and the husband's mother owned I guess a second home you'd call it, but essentially it was like a small palace way up on the hill. And Lebanon is sort of like a shrink-wrapped California. It's just a tiny little country with mountains very close to the ocean, and these mountains are very steep and right above the ocean. So from their place, you could look out over the Mediterranean, and it was amazing, amazing place. So I just arrived that day. That night, we see a part of the house I hadn't seen before, a basement as large as the entire footprint of the home. It's made of stone with arched windows looking out at ground level. Michel, my host, tells me another bomb story. He'd already told me one about playing tennis with a friend in Harissa when a bomb landed near their court. This was during the Civil War. And he said this might be the first tennis match in history that was called because of bombs. So he tells me another bomb story, and it's about this room. After he and Nora, his wife, returned to Lebanon, it was impossible for them to live in Beirut. Their family apartment building, oh, I'm sorry, I'm really screwing this up. I'm starting in the wrong place. So I'm going to back up because it's not going to make any sense to you. Apologize. Michel and his wife Nora met in the United States. So let me back up about 2 paragraphs. We met in the United States. We both attended Texas A&M. We married in Lebanon during the war, but decided to go back to the United States to work and live. We hated the war. So many of our friends were killed. You can't believe how bad it was. One day I was shopping in the electronics section of the Sears in Houston. They have a whole wall of TVs, and I was watching a newscast, and it was about Lebanon, about the war. The announcer was talking about more destruction in Beirut. Then I realized that I was looking at the courtyard of our own apartment building. Our building, they were showing footage of a rocket that had blown up in that courtyard. But it wasn't just our courtyard. My mother's car was in flames. It was horrible. I went home and said to Nora, we have to go back now. So we did. We quit our jobs and came back. I went to work for my dad at the Grundig retail store. After he died, I took it over. Nora and Michelle's mother came back from church along with Michelle's sister, Maya. His mom is bright, witty, and engaging. She looks 50, but must be much more. Michelle tells me that Maya is an architect who lives with her Lebanese husband in Saudi Arabia. She's a wonderful jazz singer, he says. That night, we see a part of the house I hadn't seen before, a basement as large as the entire footprint of the home. It's made of stone with arched windows looking out at ground level. Michelle tells me another bomb story. It's about this room. After he and Nora returned to Lebanon, it was impossible for them to live in Beirut. Their family apartment building had been too badly damaged, so they moved here to Harissa. When Harissa came under siege as well, they took shelter in this basement. They stayed in it for weeks. One day, when they couldn't stand it anymore, they went up and took a look at the main house. While they were upstairs, a shell came through the basement window. It exploded, and the basement was destroyed, but the stone house withstood the blast. The family was unhurt. Okay, that's probably enough of bombs and things. So, okay, those are 4 different samples from 4 different pieces of work and 4 different kinds of writing. And I'd be glad we have a few minutes if you have questions, or I can read some more. So you let me know what you want to do.
Michael, could you talk a little bit about your experience, assuming you have any, with writer's block?
Oh, I do have. Yes, absolutely. I've had it recently, as a matter of fact. I finished this book at the beginning of, well, in last year, in 2021, I finished it. And usually I give myself a few months to stop and reflect and think about what I've done. And then I usually have another project in my head, and I always have. I mean, since I started, which is now a long time, I've always had another project in my head. And this time I didn't have another project in my head. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and I really felt at a loss. And up until then, I had almost literally written something every day. And I guess I still was writing something every day, but much of what I was writing was not anything that I was thinking of ever showing anyone else. But somehow I just ground to a halt, and I really stopped, and I thought, okay, how am I going to kickstart myself? And I thought, well, maybe I have to expand my reading. Maybe I have to read more. Maybe I have to try to find other venues. And I thought, one of the things that had always intrigued me, and I've never read much about, but I always thought was interesting, was young adult fiction. And it had been something that I'd never thought about writing, and I'd never read, but I'd always heard like reviews of really good books that were meant for young adults. And so I started reading young adult fiction thinking, well, that sounds interesting. And for somehow that specifically kind of gave me another avenue to explore. And I began thinking of ways that I could tell new stories with a different point of view, coming from a different point of view. So and I've started working on something new now. So for me, that was really something very specific. But it was the first time I'd experienced it to that extent. And it was months and months of just not wanting to bother with it, not wanting to think about it, not wanting to do it at all.
Thank you.
Michael, I have a
Rotary
question for
involved
you.
at all?
I'm sorry, who did I hear?
Henry,
Charlie, how about you call on people? I can't see who's, maybe, okay, there's PJ, I see his hand up, okay.
Michael, I was interested in that East LA story with the zoot suit. I had remembered in that Time Life had a book of just amazing photographs, and one was of a fellow that was wearing one of those zoot suits, and the caption really indicated that they were banned for the duration of the war because of excessive materials. But I hadn't heard about the horrific rounding up of these individuals because they dared to wear this kind of clothing. And I'm wondering how you do your research and how you come up with the information that you then craft into what you do in your books.
Well, that was wonderful for me to discover that story. I didn't know that either. I mean, I had always heard about the Sleepy Lagoon murders, but I didn't know anything about it. So I love doing the research, and I would go online and just spend days digging in deeper and deeper, you know, finding blogs about people who were writing about these periods of time, you know, looking up old magazines and trying to find photographs, just as you did with the Time or Look magazine, Life magazine. Most of it's online because that's so easily accessible, and I'm a pretty good researcher, so I can go down a lot of rabbit holes and find a lot of stuff. But I also call people. For one book, I needed one piece of one book. I needed to know exactly what the interior of a 1947 Kaiser looked like, the car, which no longer exists, of course, but a Kaiser Frazer. And I needed to know exactly what the interior of that car looked like, because there was quite a long scene that involved somebody learning to drive that vehicle. And I needed to know where everything was positioned. And I did everything I could think of online. I could not find a picture of it. So finally, I looked up the AAA, and they actually have an historical section that maintains records of cars going back as far as the AAA went, which is almost at the beginning of road travel in the United States. And there was a guy there who I talked to on the phone. He said, yeah, I can get you exactly what you want. We have those resources. And it's amazing. And the thing that I've found is that people love, if you find something that you need to know, if there's something you really need to know, and you find somebody that might know something about it, people love to tell you. So I've done a lot of that too, just tracking down people and calling them and asking them about what happened then.
Super.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really a lot of fun for me to do that.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. Thanks, Michael.
You're very welcome. Okay, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. And I also want to acknowledge the bravery of an artist sharing a creative work. I think that's one of the bravest things that anybody can do, is take something that you create that came out of your research, your imagination, and put it out there for people to enjoy. So anyway,
thank you very much.
I very much admire that. Thank you. So, all right, I am going to go, let's see, share the screen again here. People see the
See the
presentation.
desktop, no slides.
No slides. Let's see. That means I didn't share
Other
it right.
monitor.
Let's try this again.
We see you.
Where's Ken Brandt when you need him?
Ha ha ha. How about now? There we go.
Hey, there they are.
All right. So let's see. I think I saw Rod on there. Is Rod still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you unmute, and do you have a good joke for us today?
I have a quartet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's 4 laughing animals there on the screen.
Yeah,
so
well, that'll work. I'm standing in for Darlene Brazil. So my background is a old trolley car in Lisbon. And so get you in a Portuguese mood for a moment. When my brother died, which is now 18 years ago, his widow passed on to me and my sister his front row seats for the San Francisco Ballet. And so I appreciate, this is courtesy of Robin Williams, his comment that ballet was men wearing pants so tight you can tell what religion they are. So, and following along with Robin Williams, he said, I think God made babies cute so we don't eat them. But, you know, Gus and I like to drink a pint now and then of beer. And Robin Williams had thoughts about beer, too. And he said, beer commercials usually show big men, manly men, doing manly things. You've just killed a small animal. It's time for a light beer. Why not have a realistic beer commercial with a realistic thing about beer where someone goes, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. You've just pissed on a dumpster. It's Miller time. But on the beer theme, I go back to Archie Bunker, who said, you can't buy beer, you can only rent it.
Good quartet there, Rod. Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Well, and we're wrapping up just about 1 minute early, but I think that was a good meeting. We had about 33 people attending, so thanks for everybody joining us back online until it's safe to gather in person again, which we all look forward to. So with that, Joe, why don't you take us out with Happy Trails?
Happy trails to you.
Until we meet again.
Happy trails to you. Keep smiling on Ben. Happy trails to you. Till we meet again.
Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye. And
International people, stick around.
And stay on for the International Service Committee meeting.
So you can go ahead and make me host.
I will do that. Let's see, I will stop screen sharing first. And
Good
I
plan.
will make you host.
Then you're a free man.
You are host.
This is co-host still. There I are. Yep. Thank you, Dan.
Right. I can stay around for a few minutes because I want to hear what's
right.
going on.
Let's see if we outlast.
Stop recording.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, thank you. That part.